Hi, I'm Paul Roberts, and this is Conscious Counseling 101. I have a request for some counseling for someone that has had some stomach problems from E. coli bacteria quite a number of years ago, and some other conditions that I don't know too much about. But the biggest problem I'm going to have with talking to this person is I can't really understand the writing very well. There's the punctuation and different things aren't really the way they should be, and I can't really totally understand what he's saying. He's about 49, I think, and he goes to Burning Man every year, and he wants to start working again. He said he was obese earlier in life. I can't tell if that's changed or not from the writing. I won't read the writing because it's very difficult to read it properly because of the punctuation and different things. But I'm going to speak to the one thing he says he wants help with, and that is to kind of overcome fear and anxiety in order to go back to work and live one day at a time and try to get on with his life and I guess just be more solid. So I actually can speak to those things. The question is, am I understanding what you're asking me fully? And I'm not sure. Okay, I'm not sure. So let's talk about these things. First, I want to give you some ancient philosophy here. And I think you said you had faith in God. That's helpful to believe there's something greater than yourself. I have faith in God as well. But in my childhood, the way that I learned about God and religion made me fearful because man, used to use in the olden days, and still does today, fear tactics to get you to fall in line and be a certain way. And so I understand that. And most of my life, I had been under the effects of fear, even though I've lived a productive life, mind you. I've always had this be one of my biggest problems, this fear of hell, okay? Of no matter what you do, you can't find a person that you can measure up to. I mean, you can. People will say good things about you if you do what they think you should do. Right? It's easy to find people that if you do what they say, you could be in their club, you could be in their church, you could be in their friendship, their organization, whatever. But they don't know anything more than you do. So when your ask for counseling came in, I looked up some things on the internet to see if I could find anything that would help. And the thing is that you can't really believe just what a person says, and it's not going to carry a lot of weight, including me. Okay. It was amazing, looked at some of the research that PhDs and people that had done a lot of research on these things had said. And while on the surface, it all sounded good, you dig a little deeper and you realize, oh my gosh, there's so many ideas they touch on here. They can't possibly believe all these ideas, and yet they have to at least seem like they are well spoken on them and talk about them and present them because they're making money on the internet and from their speaking engagements and stuff like that, of talking about all these crazy ideas from the pool of worldly ideas. And I could present any one of these to you. It might be a hit or miss because I think some of them are too far off, like astrology, for instance, the biochemical makeup that we have that we're supposedly controlling, that we can make ourselves happy, we can make ourselves whole, holistic healing and things like that you've probably heard of. None of these things are proven, and I'm highly skeptical of them. But at the same time, I probably believe they are all in effect, but we can't lock them down. We can't prove them to ourselves or anyone else. So we latch on to little things, and we better hope our concoction we put together is good enough to give us what we need. And so faith might help us reach out there and keep going and, like you say, live day by day. Put a concoction together, but the concoction could be anything, and it could be different for every single person. So I needed to boil this down for you in the most generic way possible. This might be a short video. Let me just read this ancient philosophy for you that I used to get over my own fear only a few years ago. I'm almost 60. And only a few years ago, I went to my mother and father and my family, and I tried to talk these things through with them, talk about my past and religion and whatnot. And I couldn't get anything out of them as far as what they could do to help me. I guess they didn't really realize what I had been through and why. And as a creative person and a thinker and a philosopher and just a person that is just constantly searching, because I was the firstborn, and there was no one to ask, not even my parents. They were supportive, but they didn't understand what it was I was asking. And the churches I went to, they didn't understand. They were all lost in a fog. You said you had brain fog. Not that kind of a fog, but a fog of, what I call it, a fog of certainty. You're so convinced that you know what you know, you don't look any further. You reach a psychosocial crisis, and that's just what you're going to be for the rest of your life. You're never going to be inquisitive, and you're never going to look out towards anything else. And it is what it is. This is where I come from. So I'm going to share with you the most generic, boring, I think it's Greek or Roman philosophy from the Stoics, back at the time when Paul was doing his writings, and even before that, back to Plato and Aristotle and such. And Paul would call these people that were the greatest wise thinkers of the earth fools, because they thought this is what all there is and they can't see this bigger thing. And well, okay, I'd call them maybe untouched by the Spirit if there's a God, okay? Untouched, that they can't see what Jesus had done and what Paul was trying to show them. But not fools, because on this earth they were solid. So I'm going to just say I have a lot of faith in God, and I've learned to have strength through Jesus's teachings, because Jesus came and he talked about the people he was amongst. Their world was documented well, and he corrected the flaws of the leaders of that society and showed us by that model how the leaders can make others go astray by putting their faith in man, because man will always rise to their own self-purposes. And this is where our misnomers and our flaws and all these ideas we can get come from. And if we fall into those traps that those leaders put forth, one of the keys I find to getting out of those traps is to use Jesus's teachings. But you can't just use his words in those 4 books in the Gospels, in the New Testament. You have to go and see who is he speaking to and why. Once you understand that society, and nobody reads the whole Bible, so very few do, you'll understand that what he's teaching us is a perfect reflection of what's happening today, and how we can push out things that are detrimental to ourselves and just the byproduct of mankind and leadership, and those that love money and power try to hold over us to keep us down, and we can recognize it. We can't always push it off. It's difficult, especially economically, health-wise. So many things are in our control if we make them in our control and we become heightened conscious. That's why I call this Conscious Counseling 101, because what you're going to ultimately do, if you listen to what I have to say, is learn to counsel your own self, counsel your conscious, to raise your conscious and be more aware. You may still have susceptibility to diseases and E. coli bacteria, stomach infections, and you may still be concerned and fearful. I've been healthy all the days of my life, pretty much. I mean, I've had illnesses, I've had ailments that I've had to overcome, but I've been productive, balanced, strong, all the days of my life, with the exception of this thing that I had to grow up with as a child and overcome. So I'm going to read this to you. This is from The Princess Diaries, of all places. They just quoted it. But it's from ancient philosophy. Okay, this is about, I'm assuming from your writing and your punctuation that fear is your biggest thing now, because you're trying to re-enter into the job market. You're trying to re-enter into this job that you want to do for 20 hours a week to start out. So you need energy, wherewithal, balance. You need perspective. You need faith. You need strength. You need determination. You need courage. That's what I needed to overcome what I was fearful of. Courage. So I'll read this to you. Courage is not the absence of fear. You may not get past fear. I can't guarantee it. But what it is, what courage is it's rather the judgment that something else is more important than that fear. And so you start to live not in avoidance of fear, but you start to live for the things that you become aware of that are more important than that fear and how that fear holds you down. And by not just trying to get rid of fear, but realizing something's more important, you develop courage. And when you have courage, great things can happen for you. So we're not worried about what we're throwing away, we're worried about what we're taking on. That's what's going to be better for you. Courage. So we continue. The brave may not live forever. One day at a time, do what you can with your life purpose and what you find meaningful each day. But the cautious do not live at all. From now on, this is the advice for that princess in the Princess Diaries, but just look at it yourself. This is an ancient philosophy. From now on, you'll be traveling the road between who you think you are, where you're at now, and who you can be. When you adapt this courage that you go towards, you overcome the fear, but the road you take leads you from where you are, wherever that may be, to who you can be. You may not ever get all the way to who you can be based on, you could die any day, but at any particular time, you're closer to who you can be than you would have if you hadn't made the journey, if you hadn't started the journey. And the final statement is, the key is to allow yourself to make the journey. So that requires faith. Faith in what? I had faith in Jesus' teachings, showing me how the world operates and what the nature of man is. And I realized that's the highest thing I could come to. I used it for our marriage strength of 34 years. I used it to raise my children. And ultimately, the last thing I had to do was use it to speak to my parents and family and tell them what they're missing. And I had to ultimately believe in the heightened quality of something larger than myself, in what Jesus was explaining about the society and mankind, and had courage to believe in that over and above what mankind themselves and any other religious point of view that they were trying to push for any reason, and the leaders of our society were trying to tell us. I had to have courage and belief in that highest ideal that I could find and live my life according to that and put everybody else in their places. And believe through faith that what I was being shown was higher than what was trying to be inflicted on me by all factors of society and our leaders and those that are around us that are just lost. And my life has changed very recently. So yours can too. Every day is a new day. I was just really quickly wrap up. I try to make this under 15 minutes. Just going around Skid Row the other day. I never had seen it before. We were down there with my daughter. We had to drive her to somewhere in LA. And I looked around. I go, do you know what those people are doing? Basically they're doing the same thing the hippies did. Same thing with Woodstock and Burning Man that you're doing. I looked at that. I researched that. It's just going and comparing all your ignorance and your desire with others that have ignorance and desire, but there's no real accumulation of anything. Just a thought that maybe something will happen. And you feel a little bit better. Oh, something's a little bit better. I shared and we all shared together and it's a little bit better. That's not good enough. It's also very hot out there. And if you're not very strong, that can weaken you. So I caution you about that. Think about these things I've talked about. Paul Roberts, Conscious Counseling 101.